Hey comic fans, Dave here at Ground Zero. It's Wednesday morning. That means it is time for your weekly look at what's new on the shelves at your favorite local comic book store. Now, if you've been hanging around Ground Zero lately, you've heard us talk a lot about the 90s. Now, who would have thought out of that giant, full-enhanced, holographic, die-cut cover of a decade that Image Comics, of all people, would rise up to become not only one of the leaders of the industry, but very possibly the salvation of the direct market. But that's exactly where we are. Also, if you know me, you know that one of my all-time favorite comic book creators is the legendary writer Alan Moore, who I still believe is the single greatest writer in the history of comics. How does that relate to Image Comics, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. Alan Moore is currently semi-retired, and that leaves a void in visionary comic book creators. And we all know voids are made to be filled. He also leaves a void in extreme grumpiness. Luckily, your local comic shops have that covered. Either way, Swamp Thing was a terrific, stunning run that just ruined the character for everybody who came after it, and it looked for decades like this book simply could not be touched. That was until about 10 years or so ago with the New 52. New 52 brought a writer by the name of Scott Snyder, who did a really, really good run, making the book readable for the first time in years and years. Also, you might know him from another run he did on a semi-popular DC character whose name eludes me at the moment. Either way, Scott Snyder became a star. Where is he now? He is at Image Comics, and with artist Tony Daniel, they have created Nocterra, a really snazzy book set in the future where the world is in constant darkness and there are monsters in the dark. Enter a woman with a really cool, snazzy truck. It's got great art, it's got snappy writing, this is everything you want in a comic book, and the second issue hits the stands today. I still have copies of the first, so by all means, come in if you haven't tried this book, get the first 2 issues, and hit the ground running. Now, you're probably thinking, kudos Dave for working in an Alan Moore reference on Image Comics. Bet you can't do it again. Well, Watchmen. Unquestionably the single greatest graphic novel ever done in the history of comics. This is a book that is unmatched and simply could not be touched. However, they did a really good job with the sequel, Doomsday Clock, last year. Geoff Johns and Gary Frank are fast becoming iconic, legendary creators themselves. So where are they now? They are at Image Comics, and their new creation, both book and character, Geiger, hits the stands today. I read this book last night, folks. It is really, really good. It's the story of a devoted family man who prepares for the apocalypse, but when the apocalypse comes, he gets his family in the fallout shelter and finds himself trapped outside. That leaves him to be bathed in radioactivity, where he cannot rejoin his family or all the things that mean something to him, so he instead serves as its protector. Awesome book. Glowing, radioactive protector of all things good and human. Definitely a book you want to read. This is my highest recommendation and my pick of the week. It's even got a Junkyard Joe cartoon strip on the back. Honestly, folks, this is why we read comics. Geiger from Image and Gary Frank and Geoff Johns. One more from Image, because they seem to keep having one hit after another, and that is Silver Coin. Artist Michael Walsh has been doing these anthology series where he works with various comic book writers. Think of it as Night Gallery or Twilight Zone, except in comic book form, and with some of the best comic book writers today. This particular series will have a rotating cast of comic writers. This particular issue is Chip Zdarsky. So if you're a horror fan or just a comic fan in general, absolutely a book to add to your list. Meanwhile, DC Comics would like to remind you, they still own Batman. There you are. They still own Batman. Also, if one Batman's not enough, they not only own Batman, but they own the next Batman, because you can never have too many Batmans. DC absolutely proves that point month after month. So Batman Second Son, carrying forward from the Future State series, it was actually very popular. It's on the stands today. A couple more from DC. Green Lantern gets another relaunch. In this case, we get Teen Lantern. Whether or not that's a good idea or not, we'll see. Either way, it's brand new. It's on the stands. As is the second issue of Sensational Wonder Woman, which I actually haven't read, so I don't know anything about it, other than apparently it is sensational. Over at Marvel, they do not have Batman, but they do have Spider-Man, even though you might not recognize him because he looks a little different in a new costume these days, which was supposed to premiere last issue, so I ordered a bunch of copies, and instead they premiered it the issue before. Thank you, Marvel. You're still on my list. Also from Marvel, we finally get the conclusion to King in Black. This series has been a runaway smash hit. Not much needs to be said about it. Obviously, everybody's been anxiously awaiting the finale. It is here, and now we can look forward to the trade collection. Either way, it's on the stands. Also, coming up with big stuff from Venom. This is the penultimate issue. One more to go to issue 200. This is, I think, issue 35 because it's Marvel math time. Either way, several big revelations and different things in this one. I'll be selling out. There you go. One more thing, Disney, of course, now owns just about everything in the world, including Star Wars, and Star Wars comics have absolutely been revitalized under Marvel. But their biggest series, the biggest launch they've had, has been High Republic, mostly because it premiered a bunch of new characters. Speculators went nuts having to have it. It's on, I think, 4th or 5th printing of the first issue. Either way, we've got not only Star Wars High Adventures from Marvel, but Star Wars High Adventures, High Republic Adventures from IDW. So Star Wars High Republic, Star Wars High Republic Adventures. Can you tell them apart? They hope you can. Two more to talk about. Talking of the 90s, one is Magic the Gathering gets another comic book series, and this particular one, I've got a bunch of these surprise covers. It's the secret Planeswalker cover. You don't know which cover you're getting until you rip open the poly bag and then find out. It's to kind of recreate that thrill of opening the pack. Either way, it's from Boom. Boom does good work, so there you are. And one final one, you can't have the 90s without Lady Death. Now, this is a book I haven't been bringing in recent years because, in all honesty, I'm not a fan. This is everything 90s that I didn't like. But there are those who really, really miss the character. And let's face it, if you miss the 90s, you just don't get any more 90s than Lady Death. It's cleavage and spikes and, death. So either way, it's here. It's 90s. You've been warned. Trades. Some good trades this week. In particular, finally we get the softcover version of Batman Who Laughs. This book has sold like gangbusters in hardcover, but a lot of people have been waiting for the softcover. I got a whole bunch of copies of them because this has become a perennial seller here. So I got them because I know you want them. Actually an outstanding book. Also, speaking of Batman, an artist I really like is Kelly Jones, who does a kind of a different take on Batman. He really excels at horror and things like that. But his most recent series from them, Kings of Fear, is finally collected in a trade. If you like Batman with really long ears, actually Kelly Jones is your man. Brian Michael Bendis. Remember when we used to like Brian Michael Bendis? That was before he went to DC. So now DC fans who love to complain can constantly gripe about how he's ruining the DC universe. And yet his stories are really good. Event Leviathan actually was a terrific story. Everybody who read it really enjoyed this one. So if you haven't, it's out in trade. You should buy it. That way you can complain about how Brian Michael Bendis is ruining the DC universe. But man, I really enjoyed that story. Yeah, common thing. Two more. Death Metal. The Shiny Event series is out now in a uber shiny foil enhanced hardcover. I mock Batman and I mock big crossover things, but this series actually was a lot of fun. This is what you want in comics. This is what we read comic books for. Honestly, if you like this kind of stuff, you just can't get any better than this. It belongs on every comic fan's library. So there you go. Enough said. One final book to talk about, Usagi Yojimbo. Who would have thought Usagi Yojimbo would become so hot these days? He's been around forever. I've always recommended him. It's a great series. It always has been. But it's sold in small, kind of indie numbers. And now all of a sudden, Usagi Yojimbo is the hottest character in comics. Who would have thought? For those of you who basically are recent to the party, this series collects a lot of the best stories from the past. Absolutely must have if you don't have these stories. And it's out. So that's it. But as always, only scratching the surface of all the really cool things at your local comic book store. So as always, remember, it's not about having what you want. It's about wanting what you have. Folks, stay safe, everybody.